Good morning. It's wonderful to see so many young faces ready to embark on a day that I think that you will remember as being part of your senior Catholic Faith and Action program. We have got a lot of things organised for you today, but I think when we look up the front there it says, "Who is God?" and there is an Interfaith panel, I hope that you realise that we are trying to open the doors to your mind, and so that you will have the opportunity to ask questions of people of a number of different faiths of the world, that I know that you have already covered a little bit of that knowledge. So I have a feeling that it's going to be a wonderful day. So I'm going to start with our welcome this morning. So I just want to acknowledge a couple of people. It doesn't work. Let's see what happens. There we go. So just so that we have a little bit of housekeeping and welcoming, obviously we're very happy to have students from St Monica's, the Year 11 cohort, the seniors of 2020 here joining us at our school. It's a slightly different look from what we've had before when we started this at the beginning of the year, but we're very happy to welcome you here. We welcome Adrian, and obviously we've got some important people here, your leaders of the school as well, so we welcome them. We welcome our special guests. We have Nadia Khan, who is representing the Muslim community, and also Father Laurie Tings, who is our resident Carmelite priest at our school, and also we've got the teachers from St Augustine, so we welcome all of those people. So just to give you a little bit of an outline of the day, if you need to use the facilities, so they're just through the centre there, I think you may have remembered that from before. We will be breaking for morning tea, and we'll use the hangar, which is looks like an airport hangar, that's why it's directly outside these doors. We'll just use these doors on the side rather than using the exits there to go outside. Should there be a fire, hopefully there's not going to be one of those, but if we do need to have run a fire drill, there isn't a fire drill, but if there is the fire alarm that goes off, we do need to evacuate the building quickly and with haste, but with sensibility, out through these doors out here, and we will congregate out there. There's a grassy area. Okay, so you've seen up there what the brief outline of the day is, and you'll get more details about each of those things as we proceed. So I better introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. Obviously St Augustine's boys do, but St Monica students and staff, my name is Christine Cross, and I'm the Head of Religion for Curriculum at our school. I work alongside Danielle Lynch, Dr. Danielle Lynch, who is our Director of Mission, and I also have my team of teachers in Year 11, Katie Fulton and Terry Madonna. So I'd like to invite Jack Miller up so that he can acknowledge country and welcome us with a prayer.
As Indigenous and non-Indigenous people gathering together, let us have a sense of the importance of country upon which the celebration is being held, where learning and ceremony have taken place over many thousands of years. Let us sense the land beneath our feet and acknowledge to whom it belongs, the giveaway Warrabala Yidinji and the Yirraganji people. Let us pay our respects to their elders and to all elders, past, present, and future, for we too are one in land, one in spirit, one in faith, united in God's love. We begin in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. A letter to the Hebrews. Let us be concerned for one another, to help one another, to show love and to do good. Let us not give up the habit of meeting together, as some are doing. Instead, let us encourage one another all the more, since you see that the day of the Lord is coming nearer. Whoever, whatever, or if we pray to a higher being, let us open our minds and our hearts to truth wherever it is found. In a world of polarization, division, and preconception, let us look upon this panel as an opportunity to widen our perspective. For the foundation of any religion is to connect us rather than divide. Let us seek to understand the differences and gain from them. For if war and conflict are to be avoided and the world unite, then it is imperative that we understand each other more clearly than we have before. If cultural perspective is so linked to religious heritage, it is our duty to try and understand that heritage, for the broad mind is far better than the narrow. Let us take a moment in silence to reflect or to pray to whomever or whoever we believe in, for each of us have a different notion of the divine. Samasana Chaitanya, Mary our Mother, and let us always remember, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Thank you, Jane. It's obviously that a lot of thought's been put into the words that we just read there, and I really appreciate that. So we're going to invite our speakers to come up to give you a little brief overview of themselves, and then also what their key beliefs are. I will put in the apologies for Rabbi Ari, who is the local rabbi for the Jewish faith. He is unfortunately unable to be here with us today, but we do have a very good clip from another rabbi, and he gives you his viewpoint, which is synonymous with what their faith belief is on who is God. But firstly, I'd like to, we thought we might, ladies first, so we might invite Nadia up to come and speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Nadia, and I'm from the Muslim community. Firstly, I just wanted to thank Christine for having me here. It's a real honour to be here. My father-in-law actually studied here at St. Augustine's College in the 1970s, so thank you for having me here. So I'm not an imam, I'm not someone who I guess has formally studied religion, but I just wanted to speak a little bit about the Islamic perspective of God. So the first thing I wanted to do was just to look very briefly at a theological sort of definition of God, and then to look at a way that we can experience God sort of in our day-to-day lives. So, sorry, is that me? Sorry. Sorry about that. So in terms of a theological perspective from Islam, we believe that God is one. So we believe in the unity of God, and this means that God is one in his entity. So he is not composed of parts, he is not in space and time, and he does not have partner. We also believe that he is one in his essence and in his attributes, and this means, and I think the best way to explain this is, we look for God as being the creator in creation and the provider in the provision. So let's just talk a little bit about that. There was a 12th century Persian poet and scholar by the name of Imam al-Ghazali. And he said, to know God, you have to know yourself. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to know God from the Islamic perspective and what it means to know yourself. So in the Islamic tradition, we believe that we are all born with what's called a fitrah, and this is our natural disposition. And this disposition knows God, it knows beauty, it knows truth, and it wants to reflect the beautiful names of God in the world. So it inclines to gentleness because God is gentle. It inclines to beauty. The Prophet in our tradition, Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said, God is beautiful and he loves beauty. So we want to reflect this in the world. And actually, I think it was Plato who said that beauty is the splendor of what is true. So beauty ultimately is a manifestation of what's true. God is also merciful, so we want to be people of mercy. God is generous, so we want to be people of generosity. So this disposition is within every human being, and in the world we are faced with challenges. So there are elements within the world that will cover this essence of the human being. And I think one of the biggest challenges is what in Arabic we call the nafs, and in English we can loosely translate as the ego, or And these are the need to be better than other people, the need to distinguish ourselves from other people, this arrogance that people can have that wants to set us apart from other people. It's jealousy, it's envy, it's arrogance, it's pride, it's all of these vices that can come into the human being. In Islam, the process of knowing God is a dual process. It's one of emptying the self of the vices and these things that we spoke about, and then it's adorning with the beautiful names of God so that we reflect these qualities of the world. And in the Quran, which is our holy book, it says about the Prophet Muhammad that he was only sent to perfect good character. And what is good character? It is a reflection of the divine in the world. So the spiritual process for a Muslim to know God, ultimately, although we have many books on theology, and I can give you the technical definition, Imam al-Ghazali actually says that ultimately, and he gives the analogy of honey, that you can tell somebody, I can explain to you that honey is sweet, but it's not like sugar. And he said ultimately faith is something that has to be experienced in the human heart, because this is the locus where we can connect with God. And we want this locus to be pure, and we want it to be beautiful, so it's receptive to all of these attributes to be reflected in us. That's in terms of how we can know God and our journey to God. Is there any, I guess we can wait afterwards for questions. I just also wanted to say very quickly that there's also the element of the physical body as well. So we have the nafs, which is the ego. We also have whisperings from Satan, and Satan's not that little guy with the horns and the stick. It's those negative whisperings that can come to, in our tradition, that can come to the human being. So you think negatively about people, or you have a bad opinion of people, or you get envious of people. This is the insinuations that we also need to guard against, and really to rise above all of that. So as an example, as a Muslim, we have 1 month of fasting where we fast from dawn until sunset for 1 month in the year. People always go, oh my gosh, you can't even have water, but actually we fast from water, we fast from food, and we fast from intimacy, because these are the pleasures of the body. So we also honour the body, we love the body, and it has a right on us to be cared for and to be nurtured, but it's not the most important aspect of the human being. So in the month of fasting, we withhold from these things, from the pleasures of the body and the pull of the body, because these are sort of, we can say, like a part of our animal nature. So we want to manage it, to feed the body, not to deny it, but also to manage that impulse of the body that wants what it wants. It's this idea that we don't react to situations. If you want something, you just do it. You get angry and you go off at somebody. We want to be able to respond. So you can feel hungry, you can feel like you want something, but you have to rise above it and act in your own best interest, which is actually getting in touch with the soul of the human being, which we believe is a reflection of the divine in the world. It's not divine in the sense we believe that God is one and that He's unified in His unity, but to reflect that in the world. I also just wanted to mention that we believe that God is not knowable in the sense of the mind, because the mind is in space and time. So, we have been given, for example, 99 names of God that we do reflect on every day. We reflect on these names of God, and often we do it in contemplation. So in our tradition, the original ruling of the tongue actually gets silence, it's not speech. So we want to get into the depths of contemplation so that we can really connect with these parts of ourselves. But I wanted to focus on 3 of my personal favourite names of God, and the first is Ar-Rahman, which is the merciful. And in our holy book, we have 114 chapters, and 113 of them begin with this name of God, Ar-Rahman. And Rahma in Arabic is a very beautiful word. It actually comes from the word for a woman's womb, Rahma. The womb is for a Raham. And you can hear, like etymologically, these letters are actually linked, the Ra, the Ha, and the Ma. And it's this idea that God, or when you look at the woman, for example, with the Rahma, that she gives from herself to the one that she loves, and she expands for the one that she loves. and she provides for the one that she loves without struggle. And we also believe that essentially this is one of the key names of God, that He is Ar-Rahman and He is merciful, and we want to live that reality in the world. That's one of the names. The other name that I like is Al-Jamil, which is the beautiful God. And it's the prophet, he said, that God, as I mentioned before, that God is beautiful and He loves beauty. And beauty, as I said, is rooted in truth. So we don't have a duplicity. So the scholars in our tradition say that your inward dimension, what's going on inside of you, should be more beautiful, not the same, but more beautiful than your outward. And I think we do live in a time now where we're so focused on looking a particular way outward, and we have like a duplicity. So we have an inward reality and we have an outward reality, and we always want our outward reality to look perfect and we want it to look beautiful, but we neglect this inward reality. But the real light of the human being actually is in this inward dimension. So this name is very beautiful, I think. And the last one is Al-Latif, which is God who is gentle. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said that gentleness doesn't adorn anything except that it makes it beautiful. And gentleness, it's in politeness, it's in courtesy, particularly to people in your home and in your family, and to your teachers, and to people, to all people actually, to be kind to people. I think ultimately these are part of the virtues that we want to acquire as a human being. So for God, and it's very difficult to define God. I hope I've done just a little tip of the iceberg, but that's the Islamic perspective ultimately, that we want to experience God. It's not something that we just do one day a week. This is every day, and we have particular times in the day where we worship God, particularly at the changing of the night to the day and the day to the night, because these are signs of God. So yes, I think I'm just talking now, so I might leave it there. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions on anything, I'm really happy to ask it. After, if you'd like to ask any questions, I'd be really happy to answer. Thank you very much, and I'll thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. That was very insightful. So I'm now going to invite Father Laurie to come up and speak. And after we've finished, and then we've watched our little YouTube clip from the rabbi, then there will be an opportunity for the students to ask questions. So if you have got a question, please try and hold it in your mind, because we will have some roving mics, and you'll be able to ask those questions, and they'll be able to respond to those questions. So I'll just invite Father Laurie to come up. Thank you.
Well, good morning, staff and students. One of the Year 11s, when I told him this morning that he had to ask some intelligent questions to us, he said he will ask, what did I have for lunch yesterday? And I suggested, why don't you ask, did I think of God when I was having lunch yesterday? I can give you a very quick one-word answer there. Maybe because, being a Catholic priest and having been on for 45 years, a lot of people sometimes think that we channel God, or we have this direct line to God, and a number of people say to a Catholic priest, when they're in some sort of trouble, you better say a prayer to God for me. And my answer is always, well, hey, your line is as direct to God as mine is, sometimes more so. You have a chat to the guy, So we all have all sorts of scattered ideas about God, and I've gone through a whole list of them in my 71 years and 4 months and 10 days of life. And if I were to be bluntly honest with you, I would say at the age of 71, 4 and 10 days, that I'm not sure. I used to be sure, and as you get older, Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, we begin to doubt and wonder about things that we thought were so certain of in the afterlife and God and so on, that it was characterised our younger years. And it certainly has, but to me the question is interesting. That if we go outside and we see an object that we don't know what it is, we might say, what is it? If we see a person outside that we don't know, we might say, who is it? We make that distinction quite readily. You know, an object we don't recognise, what is it? A person we don't recognise, who is it? The question is, who is God? So what we are doing in our minds is, if you like, making God into a person. And that immediately can create a whole lot of complex things for us to work through. And I can remember when I was a little kid in England, I was terrified of God. The nuns in Leeds in Yorkshire, where I went to school for my first few years of schooling, told us what we take for granted as a truth, that God is everywhere. And somebody once asked me, you know, to pray to him because he was going to the casino here in Cairns to gamble. He said, pray to God that I'll win. I said, God doesn't go near casinos. If you go to a casino, you're on your own. So I made a fairly definite statement there. And I think the same applies for poker machines. He doesn't go within 5 metres of a poker machine. If you play them, you're on your own, pal. But no, the general Christian belief, of course, or the general belief about God is that God permeates everywhere. And I can remember this dear nun, Sister Assumption, in England, telling us that, you know, God sees everything you do. Your parents might miss a few things, you might get away with something. Your teachers, even they, in their infallible wisdom, they too might, you know, miss something and they don't see what to do, get away with it. God sees everything. He's watching you, and it's a bit like those of you who may have seen Lord of the Rings, this big tower with an eye on top of it, looking everywhere, and the most fearsome thing. That was my idea of God for quite a lot of my childhood. I was terrified of God. And and I remember lying there in bed at night, you know, the little 8-year-old, thinking there's this eye somewhere in the room staring at me, daring me to do something wrong, you know. Not that 8-year-olds do much wrong, but anyway, there you go. And I remember my mother, who was a good Catholic, putting a crucifix in my room, you know, a cross with a figure of Christ on it. And the figure of Christ was luminous, and it glowed in the dark. And I was so scared of it that I actually, you know, ripped the figure of Christ off the crucifix, broke the arms off, broke the legs off, broke it in half. And in my bedroom there were these little vents, you know, and I stuck them through there, and they fell in between the walls of the house. And as far as I know, they're probably there to this very day because the house is still there. But then I moved into, you know, an area in my teenage years where I didn't believe the scary God anymore. I didn't believe the big eye on top of the tower anymore. But I wasn't sure what I believed. And I decided that I can get on through life quite well, thank you very much, without God. And I wasn't scared of God because I didn't really care about God. This is the thing about God, you know, that the idea of God that we have is really brought to us through our own life experiences and who we are, what age we are, what's happening to us, and so on. And we go through the various stages. So I went from fear to, I thought, I'm not going to go through my life being scared of something I can't see. So I decided on indifference. And then it was funny, God works in funny ways. It was during my time of studied indifference to God that he called me and said, I want you to be a Catholic priest. We often believe in the Catholic Church that we don't choose to be priests or brothers or sisters. God chooses us. And in my time of utter indifference to God was when God planted the seed of vocation in my life. How I see God today is, again, connectivity, if you like, friendship. I try to see God as my friend. All of you know who friends are. You know who your friends are. You know the pleasure you have when you are with your friends because you can relax, you can be yourself, and you know that you can be part of a relationship with your friend and they with you. And it's a very warm and comfortable place to be. And I try to see that relationship with God in my own extreme old age. And I find God most helpful to me in the scriptures. So I read the scriptures either a mass on Sunday or sometimes when I say my prayers during the day. And what I try to do when God is mentioned is try to drag God from up there, where most of us, if we say point to God, they all go, ugh. Okay? It's not that it's stuck on the ceiling. We're pointing to the sky. Catholics try to believe, Christians try to believe, and I'm sure the other faiths try to believe that God is somewhere in me and driving me like an internal engine through life and caring. And the big thing to it, which many people find very interesting conclusion, the big thing that many people find very hard about God is the idea that God knows my name. We can all look at the pictures, like, we just had the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and we've suddenly got all cosmic again. And we've seen all the old 1969 black and white things of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, jumping around on the moon. And in 1969, wow, that was a big deal. I remember watching the black and white TV out underneath it, live from the moon. And I thought, wow, 50 years later, nothing much has happened. So we're very finite in terms of how we are seeing the universe. But suddenly we've got all very cosmic. We're talking about stars and planets and outer space. We've all seen those pictures of outer space. And we have these incredible things of light that travel at 180,000 miles per second. There are lights from stars that have been there for 1 million years. And the light at that speed still hasn't reached us. And so we can sort of just kind of try to get our head around the enormity of space and the Christian faith, or the faith of, I'm speaking as a Christian, a Catholic here, that somehow or other God is in control of all this. But that same God that's in control of this massive outer space of the universe, and even to the depths and the intricacies of the smallest leaf, which is the whole ecosystem in itself, knows my name, knows all about me, loves me, died for me, cares for me, destines me to eternal life. These are the personal things that really we find hard to get our head around. We can all kind of make an objective God, the creator of the universe, the architect of the universe, the great planner, the great designer. Many people who claim not to believe in God can say, yeah, I see that. But the God who knows my name, who knows me better than I know myself, that's the hard part. And to the degree that we can actually get onto that part is the degree to which we can give a lot of depth to our own spiritual life and therefore the life that we lead. I'll leave it at that. I think the rabbi is going to come on now, and then after that, the Q&A starts.
Thank you very much, Brother. That was very interesting, and we're looking forward to some of the questions that the students might have for you.
Something you said earlier, which is that people don't know what they mean when they say the word God. People have actually said this to me. They say, do you even know what you mean when you say the word God? You talk about relating to Him, you pray to Him, you call it a hymn. What do we mean by God? Who is God? What is God? I mean, if God is something that is beyond this world, how can we even begin to conceive of something like that?
I mean, it's true. As it's written in Psalms, the only praise we really could give God is silence, stillness. But we are humans, and we've got this issue of being humans. And so we need to have some terms in which we could speak of God, knowing all the while that we are speaking in borrowed sense. And so the way that Maimonides puts it out, the way the Rambam puts it out is he will not use the term God when he opens the discussion at the beginning of his Mishneh Torah on purpose, so that a person doesn't insert it with some other idea. He talks about Matsui Rishon, primal existence, that which was before all things, the first entity. Yeah? And then he develops, well, what would that be? Yeah? Well, you couldn't have two firsts, by definition. You wouldn't have something that was that occupied space or time, by definition, because it's first. So it's not in anything, it's not living by anything, it's not a contingent being, it's a necessary being. Also by definition, if it's first, then it doesn't rely on anything for its existence, and so on. And when we begin to absorb what we mean by that entity, we begin to understand God. We begin to, at least in human terms, understand what we mean when we say God. And so essentially, we're not talking about something that exists. We're talking about existence itself, if you could say such a thing. Yeah? Something that exists is always contingent. It exists because of. Existence, capital E, is the very force of existence itself, if one could say such a thing. Like what being is. And therefore, the Hebrew expression of this entity that we call God is Yud, He, Vav, He, which simply expresses being. So in Hebrew, to be is lihyot, was haya, is hoveh, will be yeh. It's the same letters, it's the same root. Yud, He, Vav, He is existence, self, capital. Well, that takes God out of the box. And when we realize that all that is only is because that is, that it is one, that it is the source of all things, and that there's only one way that things can go in terms, that it's not drawing from two sources of being, it changes the whole way.
So God is the source, the powerhouse of existence itself. That's how you're defining it.
That is how I'm defining it. That's how we've always
That's how we define it. How we define it. Okay. So where do all
But
these...
that entity obviously would defy definition in reality, right? So we're borrowing terms in order to be able to discuss it.
Right. So all these terms of God being all loving, all powerful, all knowing, you're saying these are borrowed terms.
Sure.
That doesn't really define it of his essence.
We don't have words with which to define such an entity.
Right. Because all these words are finite.
So we borrow them knowing that we're borrowing them.
Right.
And we are connecting as close as we can to that entity.
So that's what
And
it is.
so, and we understand that in our understanding of it, God uses our terms, right? You know, when you feel like there's connection and there's flow and things are well, and what do you call that? Love? No, right? So I love you. You know,
So we can never perceive the essence of God. Never.
when we say that, you know, it's interesting because the Rambam doesn't ask us or doesn't present this idea of believing in God. He's talking about knowing God. Knowing God. And it's all a question of experiential knowledge. Da'at in Hebrew is experiential knowledge. Well, not just that I'm learning about God, but that I'm experiencing the force of existence impinging.
And how can we have a relationship with this entity then? The source of existence?
Because we recognize existence. We recognize my own existence. And we recognize that there's a source. And that it is constantly expressing itself in all that is. And so my awareness of it, that's my mode through which I connect. And when I experience that expression, and I know myself as an expression, I'm able to recognize that there is existence that's shared. And the more that I open myself to that, the more that I lean into that, the more that I care about how that works and what keeps it away from me, is the way that I should.
So we've heard from the third monotheistic religion of the world, Judaism, and we've heard there that once again he talks about one God, but I think the key essence thing that he was talking about there was that they experience God in their everyday life, and that's been echoed today as well. So now we're going to open up the floor to anyone who has questions. So we've got 2 roving microphones. So I'll give one to Miss Innes, and I'll give one to Ms. Fulton. And if you've got a question, just put your hand up, we'll come to you, and then we'll hear your question, and then just tell us who you're directing the question to, and I'm sure our panel members would like to answer it to the best of their ability. We've got a question up there. There's usually so many questions in the classroom. Come on. Themes of 2020. You must have questions in your mind. Okay, here we go. Oh, we've got one in the front here. Jack's got one.
Father Laurie, you said that you were called by God to be a priest? What do you mean? How are you called, basically?
Thank you for the question. It's similar to asking how long is a piece of string. If you asked 100 priests, how do you feel your call to that particular way of life, you get 100 different answers. Mine is a very uninspiring one. This is how I believe God works. As I said, in my teenage years, I decided I believed in God, but I always had a very studied indifference as to what that actually meant. I was just quite happy being a teenager, which in the 1960s was much simpler than it is today. And we were allowed to be teenagers. We were allowed to ride our bikes all around. Had to be home by dark, that was the only rule. Today we're far more confined, I think, and less free. But anyway, my best friend was going to be a priest, and I thought, well, whatever turns you on. We were living in Adelaide at the time in South Australia, and one day we were riding our bikes around the mangrove swamps around Port Adelaide, and he said he was going on a camp to Melbourne for a week, and that this religious order called the Carmelites, so called because they were founded on Mount Carmel in modern-day Lebanon back in the 11th century, were paying for the train fare to Melbourne and back to Adelaide and the week. And I got desperately jealous and decided I wanted to go on that camp. It sounded good. I had very poor parents who couldn't even afford to go 50 kilometres down the road for a holiday. The idea of an interstate holiday was just almost like a trip to the moon for me in those days. So I went to the priest, the parish priest, and lied. I said, I'm interested in being a priest. It was a complete and utter lie. I wasn't interested in being anything of the sort. I wanted to go on this camp. And to cut a long story short, I went on the camp and I had a good time. And I came back from the camp, 10 days later, on the train. I love train travel. And they thought, oh, good, took them for a ride, didn't I? And I felt rather proud of myself. The next 2 or 3 years, the seed that was planted on that camp grew into a tree, and I finally applied to enter the seminary or the training in 1966. Thinking, well, I'll give it a go. And 52 years later, 53 years later, I'm still here. I just believe that's how God works. It doesn't have to be through a vision of angels or anything like that. I just think God works even through our dishonesty, even through our sinfulness, even through our humanity, even through our frailty and our insecurity, our indifference. I think sometimes that's the breeding ground which God prefers to work in. And I just think in my case, I felt open enough with my parents' permission to give it a try. And I've been a very happy and contented and fulfilled human being in the years since. Is that a fair answer to your question? There's a lot of reasons why, and that was mine.
I suppose the question for both of you, how do you see each other's God? Like, how does a Muslim see the Christian God? Is it the same God, or is it kind of, I guess, for example, you see Christians as praying to the same God, praying differently, or is it praying to the whole God?
Thank you so much. That's a brilliant question. And I'm really glad that you asked that, because we do live in a time now where there is so much division among communities, and there's actually a saying in our tradition that unity doesn't come from uniformity, it comes from a respect for difference. So this means we don't all have to be the same, but we have to respect each other. So I think there is a presumption that we all have to be the same to get along. We don't. We have to learn how to respect each other. So thank you very much for your question. It's a a brilliant question. From the Muslim perspective, we believe in all of the prophets. So we love Abraham, peace be upon him. We love Moses, and we love Jesus, peace be upon him. We believe that Jesus healed he healed lepers, he cured the blind. We believe that. We believe in Mary, and that she also gave birth to him through immaculate conception. And we have a great love for Jesus. We have chapters in our Quran that are named after his mother, Mary, and she's revered for us as well. We use the word Allah for God, but we believe it's the same God. Actually, Rumi said, he said the candles are many, but the light is one. And I think this message is so powerful that actually inside all of us is this light of God. And I really love what the rabbi said about this idea that God has no beginning and he has no end, and we all are trying to forge this connection with God to understand him within the limited capacity of our minds. So just in short, yes, we believe it's the same God. We don't have our own little God that we worship. I think what makes us different is that we believe in one God, and I'm not well versed in the Christian tradition to know. So please correct me, Father Laurie, if there's more to be said on that. We believe in the oneness of God. So he is one in his entity, in his attributes, and in his actions. So just like the rabbi was saying, that he is the one creator. He doesn't have a beginning. He doesn't have an end. He is self-subsisting, so he can look after everything. He's independent of us. And he doesn't need creation. He doesn't need creation. So essentially, I think, yes, it's the one God. And I just want to go back to what I said before about God being, we look for God as being the creator in creation and the provider in the provision. So again, it's about connecting that relationship again. But thank you very much for your question. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
This is for both Father Laurie and Nadia. I was just wondering if there's ever been a time where you've doubted your faith or even like the existence of your God.
Well, my answer to that is, as a human being, yes. And as you said, as I get older in age, not that I've got one foot in the grave yet, but I'm getting there. Things that I was very certain about, some do sometimes become doubtful. I have in 2 periods of my life been so disillusioned with life. I've never been suicidal, but I have times thought, where is my life going? Prior to being a priest, and once after being a priest, when I was actually diagnosed about 20 years ago with clinical depression, and I had to sort of take time out of the priesthood to get that treated, which has been successful. A lot of people think, see how well-rounded and normal I am now. So it obviously worked. But in that time, I remember I was 49 years old, and I can remember sitting in my room. I was living in Sydney at the time, which would depress anybody. Okay, sorry, Mr. Brennan. But anyway, and saying I'm 49, so I'm probably figuring I'm 2/3 of the way through my life. So I've only got a third to go. It was as desperate as that, I'm thinking counting. Maybe I've got about 11,000 days to go. It was really hard stuff, and I did not see God in that at all. And my saviours at that time were not God, but the professional people that I used to go and get counselled by, and the medication that I was taking. They were my gods then. But I still believe that even though I had that distant from God as a priest, I don't think God was in any shape or form distant from me. And to me, that's what sustains me. No matter what life chucks at me, And but yeah, basically we're human beings, and we feel and experience like any human being.
Answer your question. I kind of like being up here now. I'm just kidding. Have I ever doubted God? No. In my heart, never. But what I have doubted is my capacity to, I guess, submit to God and to connect to God. I've doubted that in my life, and one period in particular, probably when I was about your age. I was in year 11, year 12, I was going to do the HSC, and I had everything. I had a beautiful family. I had, I was about to start law school. I had like the car that I wanted. I had like amazing friends and the clothes and just whatever you think would make a girl happy. I had all of that, but I think there is a deficiency within the human being that can only be filled with a connection to God. And then that set out, I guess, on my path to consolidating my relationship, I was saying, with God. In terms of, it's actually interesting because there's a quote by Shakespeare, and he said, "The emptiest pot makes the loudest noise." So when you're hollow inside, you make a lot of noise, and I feel the world is very noisy. There's a lot of entertainment, there's a lot of music, there's a lot of social media. So I've been on my own journey. Actually, Rumi, he's a 13th century poet and scholar. He said, "Why are you looking for water when you are the stream?" And actually, this is all in the human being. And Ali, one of the nephew of the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, "This world you keep in your hand, but not in your heart. So your heart is for God, but we do things in the world. We are in the world. We do things of the world." So my distraction has been in the world and getting distracted and not putting in our tradition. There's a concept of what's called adab, and it's etiquette. And it's very, very central that you have etiquette with your teachers, you have etiquette with your parents, you have etiquette with everybody that you meet. And ultimately, when you look actually at the linguistic definition of adab, this politeness and this courtesy and this etiquette that you have with people, it's about putting things in their proper place. So I haven't doubted, I don't think, God. What I've doubted is whether or not I've been putting things in their proper place. And I've had this adab with God and with myself and with things in my life. So if I haven't put things in their proper place, then it becomes deficient. And I think, just to say, without getting too personal, that's a journey for each individual to find what is putting things in their right place. And like, for example, you can see I travelled a lot with my work, and my career was very, very important to me, and I loved all of that. But now, actually, I'm living in Atherton with just my husband and I. I'm not with my family. I'm not working. I'm not with my friends. And I find a lot of beauty in just gardening, actually. One of the scholars in our tradition, he says, he's a very traditional scholar, so it's from a long time ago. And he said, if what you have now doesn't suffice you, the whole world won't suffice you. So this has to be corrected, actually, in the human being, this aspect. And just to say, yeah, I think for my own journey, I've always believed in God. I went through not putting things in their proper places and putting importance on things that probably I shouldn't have put importance. And a lot of that, I think, has been corrected through being a little bit detached from the world. And I think we are very engaged in the world. We give our hearts to the world. We have this concept. Am I talking too much? I'm kind of going off topic. Sorry. I'm a bit off topic. I might just leave it there, but if you have any other questions, I can answer that.
I had a question for Nadia as well. Earlier on you said every so often you contemplate on the 99 names of God. I didn't really understand what you meant there. Would you be able to talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So that God is limitless and vast and beyond what we can comprehend Him to be. In our holy book, in the Quran, and in some of the sayings of the Prophet, He's given us 99 names that we can reflect on. And it's not capped at 99, but we have these 99 names. And some of them, as we said, was Ar-Rahman, the merciful, the gentle, the loving, the patient, the generous, the light, the knowledge, the power, all of these different names. So these are names, and in our tradition, one of my favourite names, actually, I have many, but one of my favourite is as-salam, which is the peace. He is peace. And actually when we greet each other as Muslims, we say assalamu alaikum, and it's peace be upon you. And so it's not a greeting of, hey, how you going? It's actually, I want peace for you. And actually peace in reality is alignment with the divine. This is when peace comes, because there is an alignment. Anything that you resist, that gap, you're going to be agitated. You have to be in touch with reality, and submission is not a passive state. It's not, oh, I give up and everything can happen. But this ability to align with reality does give peace, actually. And that's the first thing. I just want to also say that on this issue of peace, which is another one of God's names, that it's something that every human being craves. I think in life now we look for happiness, but the concept of peace actually in our tradition, when you put things in their proper place and you have this other that we spoke about before, and when you live a life that's virtuous, actually the byproduct of that is peace. It's not happiness. Happiness is an emotional, psychological state that you get a new car and you win a football match and you feel happy, and we all want that. That's okay, and that's embedded in the human being to want that. But actually what's deeper, the craving of the soul, actually it's peace. And peace is a very steady state. So you can be going through difficulty, but underneath that there is peace because you're connected to something that's beyond the ups and downs of life. And that also goes, I guess, to the issue of attachment. So when we're attached to something, if I'm attached to, say, Christine, there's a rope tied around her and there's a rope tied around me. When she goes up, where am I going to go? I'm going to go up. Yeah. When she goes down, where am I going to go? Down. So we have to be very careful about what we're attached to in the world. And there are natural fluctuations, like we're human beings. But as I've mentioned before, that we hold the world in our hands, but not in our heart, because this is reserved for God. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
This question applies to both of you, but I was wondering, do scientific discoveries ever impact the strength of your faith?
Do scientific discoveries impact my faith? When I was at school, I failed science in every exam. When I was in year 11, the highest mark I got for science, in those days there were 3 terms, we had exams at the end of each term. The highest mark I ever got for science in year 11 was 18%, 18. So science hasn't had a great understanding or impact on me, but I understand your question that, you know, the quick answer is no, it hasn't. Those who do understand far more about God than I do, and those who understand science far more than I do, recognise and proclaim that the two can coexist quite comfortably, and that science explains. I'm way out of my depth now. I'm talking about what science does. I'm way out of my depth, so I'm going to say something stupid again, I'm sure, but science explains the natural world, and in a way, science then explains, I guess, what's beyond that by sort of. I think that's true. I don't know. I'm way out of my depth there, but it's. There used to be a thing called the God of the Gaps, where anything that science couldn't explain, we would immediately say, "Well, that's God," because we couldn't understand it through science. So we plonked God there. Then, yeah, we were shock horror. Suddenly, science can explain something. So they said, "All right, that's science. God's over there." And we kept pushing God away. That was called the God of the Gaps, the God of the things we couldn't understand. That God has been completely discredited now in thinking, and now science and the life beyond the material world and the things that can be explained by scientific laws are seen to be in complete harmony and not in conflict with each other. But Nadia might have a far more intense answer to give to that
one way to know the world, but I don't think it's the only way to know the world. So for example, science believes that what we can see, what we can hear, what we can taste, what we can touch is what's real in the world. And that's true, that is true. That's how we can experience the world, and it's one way to know the world. But I would just say it's not the only way to know the world. And we spoke a lot about God and that sort of thing. So I think there's other dimensions within the human being that can experience knowledge and to know things that are just not limited to the realm of science.
Nadia, I have a question for you. You use masculine language for God, as is common in Christianity, Judaism,
So
Islam.
can you say that again? Sorry.
You use masculine language for
Yes,
God,
yes.
so you use pronouns he
Yes.
as the norm. Do you think using normal masculine language as the norm does a disservice to female humanity by in some way equating God with masculinity?
Very nice question. Very nice question. So in Arabic, when we say he, it incorporates the female. So women have an exclusivity in the way that they're addressed. So, but with the masculine, you can say that group, and that is a male pronoun, and it includes the female. So when we say he, we can include the female. But to be honest, even when people ask me about the headscarf, I find a lot of discussions that we can have, though they're really important questions, they limit something that's incredibly vast, and I'm not trying to diminish it or to downplay it, but God is beyond gender. It's not, I think it's just for ease of language we say he, but I don't picture God as like a man with a beard or anything like that. I think it's convenient to say that, but I don't think it does a disservice to women. In my personal opinion, I can understand like if women do feel offended by that, but personally I don't at all. I think God is beyond gender, is even beyond language, and language is so limiting in the way that we have to communicate, and so this is the way that we communicate it, but I don't think it's, in my view, diminishing to women. Right?
This is for both of you. Are there any aspects of your faith like you don't believe in, like at all? Because there's space in both faiths for doubt and specific things you go, oh, that might not be correct. Is that the same for both of you?
Can I just make sure I'm answering the question? Are you saying, was the question, are there any aspects of my faith that I doubt or don't believe? Was that the question? Okay. I find it hard to, because I prefer to sort of live my life nourished by what I do believe about all sorts of things, rather than what I don't believe. In terms of my faith, I was only having this conversation with Father Frank Gordon last night when he came round to my place for a drink, hot chocolate, of course, and we were talking about the level, the type of Christianity that we call fundamentalism, and those of you in St Augustine's, when you were in Year 7, we went to Canola Lakes for the Year 7 camp, and the Year 8 camp, I think, was before that. And they are, banishment up there, actually are called Christian fundamentalists, and they believe that the earth was made, Genesis 1, at 9 o'clock in the morning, on the 27th of October, in the year 4004 BC. And that's what it all works out by the Bible. I don't believe a word of that, you know. Okay, it's there are people who, you know, have a branch of the faith which is called fundamentalism or literalism, if you like, and they've taken the Bible and they've actually worked it down to 9 o'clock in the morning, and that the Grand Canyon, I've never been there, but I've seen the pictures. The Grand Canyon was made on Thursday of Creation Week. There are different ways that people try to prism God and their faith into their life experience, but that is one way, that literal fundamentalism. but I just cannot have a bar of it all. To this degree that I do understand science, which isn't very much. I prefer to see the Earth as billions of years old and evolving and continuing to evolve way beyond our lifetime and into the future. And thank you, Brother Joe. Did you get my right side? Okay. He comes with his sticks and he takes photos of you when you least expect it. So there we go. All right, so is that a fair, at least that's one aspect anyway, the literal thing, you know. And a lot of people, tragically, a lot of people will grow up with that, and then when they stop believing in that the Grand Canyon was made on Thursday, and that the Earth God started creating at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 27th of October, they chuck that out, and they chuck the whole thing out. And there's a huge richness in our faith, in our Catholicism, our Christianity, our Buddhism, our Islam, our Judaism, and you know, there's a huge reservoir of life-giving things in there. To chuck it all out for one reason is really doing ourselves a great disservice.
I'll just say on that question, in terms of the teachings of my tradition, no, I don't have doubts about that. I struggle a lot with what I see in the media about the way that Islam is reflected in the media. It doesn't cause me to question my own tradition because I read, I go to classes, and it's something that I'm engaged in, I guess experientially and also sort of academically. I'm interested in it. But I do struggle in a lot of ways with the way that Islam is portrayed, and it breaks my heart, to be honest, to see that. And that's why I'm here today to just give a different perspective. I think the media just has, ripped Islam to shreds, and it breaks my heart because I do love the Prophet and I love God, and just to see anything defamed that way. And it's not to say we don't have extremism. There's Muslim extremism out there, but it's a very, very small minority of the Muslim population. And that sort of stuff, it troubles me when I see people doing that sort of stuff. And do I think it has a foundation in the tradition? No, it doesn't. And for the main, when even percentage-wise, 0.001% of the Muslim population is engaged in Islamic extremism, but they get most of the coverage on the TV. So my husband and I, we don't have a TV, we don't have Facebook, we don't have social media, but partly for that reason, because I just think it's so negative and it's so antithetical to what we believe as Muslims and what our ethics are and that sort of thing. So that sort of stuff that troubles me, but I don't have doubts in terms of my tradition. There's nothing that's more important to me or more beloved to me.
Or how their faith is run. So I'd just like to introduce our panellists. You have the information up on the PowerPoint there about who they are and what their background is. So they'll just spend 5 minutes each, but I'll just call them by name and then we'll just give them a clap, and then I'll invite that first speaker to come up. So we've got Quentin Genshu, who is a Buddhist teacher. So welcome to our panel today. And we've got Patricia Lockington, and Patricia is a liaison officer who works at Holy Spirit College, and they have a campus in Cairns as well as Cooktown. We've got David Singh, who is a member of the Sikh community here in Cairns, and I believe is also a personal friend of Patrick, who works in our Tully's area. And then we've got Richard Warman, and he is going to represent the Torres Strait Islander faith background. So we'd like to welcome him, please. So. We were just discussing outside who should go first, but we did say ladies first, but actually you wouldn't do that. There was the other idea that we might have Sikh first, and then our Indigenous spiritualities, and then followed by Quentin. Do you want to talk? Yeah. David, so welcome. Oh, you wanted to... Thank you very much.
I didn't realize I was talking to all of the spirit, but all good. I'm used to the crowd. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting here today, the Gimawalabiri Yidinji Nation and the Yurikanji Nation. And Yidinji Nation and the Yurikanji Nation are really real close together. I come from the Kukulalagi Nation, which is up in Wujul, Cooktown, in Wujul, Mossman area, that area there, and out a bit west there as well. That's my grandmother's country. My grandmother comes from the Gadari Nation, which is the Fraser Island Nation down in Fraser Island down south there. Beautiful island, and I recommend you all go and see that country. And our country up north, we have beautiful reef and rainforest. I flew up to Darley Island, that's where my father's mother come from Errol, the traditional name. So I'm both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island. But today we have Richard, our Torres Strait Island brother, we call him Bala in Torres Strait Island language. And he'll be letting you know about our Torres Strait Island traditional owners up there. So without further ado, I've just got some notes that I've jotted down as well. And across Australia, so, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people, they did not know God as God. Non-Indigenous people know God. We knew that there was a creator. And in the dream time, our rainbow serpent created the lands and the waterways and everything that you see here today. And in traditional times, our land was really different. And I always say that our ancestors still walk the land today, and we can feel them. We feel them, and they walk with us. And non-Indigenous people have seen our ancestors as well. So our ancestors, they're like how Jesus was to us. Our ancestors are also like Jesus to us. So they're our protectors. They give us, from them we get our laws, we get our customs, and everything that our Aboriginal people know about our tradition and custom, and what we practice today is what our ancestors gave us. And they also gave us totems. And for Fraser Island, our grandfather's totem is the dolphin. And in Kukulalagi, our totem is the little hen that's in the rainforest that goes around, and just rummage around and things like that. And those totems are really real. Because one day I was fishing right out in the Barrier Reef with my auntie, and she's from Errol, down the island. And we came across this, came across this school of dolphins right around the boat, and they were like young dolphins. And then I knew from that point that the dolphin was my totem. And also when we went to Fraser Island, Mum and my daughter, we also were met there by 5 big dingoes. And the dingoes are also our totem, because when we went there, the big dingoes come and they visited us at the motel, and also knew from that point that the dingo was our totem as well. The other thing, my grandparents, they were stolen generation. That's why we could not, we don't know our language, but I go back to our on country where Kukulalagi, and our young people, they know their language, and also listen to the elders. And that's how we carry on our customs and traditions, through the dancing and the song and sitting down and hearing the stories from the elders. Okay. There's also like ceremonies. There's ceremonies where when the new child is born, we baptize them in Mother Earth. And the reason for baptizing them in the Mother Earth, because the Mother Earth, and in our language we call it Bubu, and the ocean is Jalan, and the sun is Nagar. And so, when we bathe our babies in the earth, that strength from Mother Earth gives that the baby, keeps the baby strong. And the other thing is that the DNA of our ancestors are in the earth there, and even the blood that was shed. And you know that story. So we have like initiation ceremonies, and those initiation ceremonies have got a lot to do with men's business and women's business. So women and men are separate. We also have creation stories. Our creation story is up north there at Chinatown, if you know a little bit about up there. Yeah, and so in this modern time now, a lot of our Indigenous Aboriginal people come to know God through the non-Indigenous people that came to our land. We accepted our Father God and Jesus the Christ into our hearts because we knew there was a Creator, and the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God was with us. Like our people have been on this land, and in our language we call it Bama people, have been on this land for 50 to 60,000 years, and that's scientifically documented. There was a cousin of mine from the Yidinji nation who did his DNA, and his people were living off that on the land here, just around Cairns, for about 2,000 years. They documented it from his DNA. So, you know, we've been here for a long time, and we'll still be here for a long time. Could I please just read you something? I don't know if you got this one, if Christine's got this. But before I read it, sorry, I'd just like to let you know that my mum wrote a book and her stories. The story of a Wunju story about two boys going into the mangrove. And they weren't supposed to go there after dark, and that's how the parents disciplined the children. And apparently one of the boys didn't listen, and they went further to the mangrove, and they met this Wunju, and he was hanging up on the tree. And they were too late. They turned one of the boys into the bird because he didn't listen. And in the mangrove today, you can hear them calling Wunju. This other one here was painted by one of our Torres Strait Island students from Holy Spirit College. And this is a creation story. And there you see the sun, upside down. You see the sun, the sea and the land. And down the bottom you see all these, that's all our tribal nations down the bottom there. And that student, Nigel, her name, she left the college to keep it. So, you know, her footprint is there at the college, and we're so glad to have it, man. But and our principal is gonna make copies, and if people want to have copies of that, I'd recommend it because that's a fantastic creative painting. Yeah. The other thing, there are resources around if you're doing studies. This book here, Our Mob God Story, is about Aboriginal artists who painted their story, their personal story about God. So we have to go on the net. You can buy that book for about $50. It's good if you can keep it in your library and use it as a reference point. Okay. The other thing that I'd like to also show you is, and I'll give this to Christine, the copies, is that this document was written by Reverend George Roosevelt, which is my uncle. And he talks about Aboriginal, the gospel and Aboriginal people, and also spirituality and also theology. So, and it's got the Aboriginal Our Father prayer in it as well. Okay? So I won't take up any more of your time, but I'll just end on this, I'm also a baptised Catholic. I'm a parishioner at Holy Spirit College. I'm involved in the children's liturgy, and I'm also involved, the leader of our cultural team out there. And it's really important that we have culture right across Australia, because Indigenous business and Torres Strait Island business is everybody's business. So I'd just like to end, and if I could at the end when we finish, I wrote this prayer for our reconciliation team for the diocese, and I also put Lloyd's painting in the background there, so it will go into our reconciliation document. And you know, we're proud of you students, because you do things like that make us happy and proud, you know. I'd just like to finish off with this extract from Pope John Paul II. He addressed the whole nation, Aboriginal and Torres Strait nation in Alice Springs in 1986. And one of the things he said was, this is extract number 13, as we listen to the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, seek out the best things for your traditional ways. If you do, you will come to realize more and more your great human and Christianity dignity. Let your minds and your hearts be strengthened to begin a new life now. Past hurts cannot be healed by violence, nor are present injustices removed by resentment. Your Christian faith calls you to become the best kind of Aboriginal people you can be. This is possible only if reconciliation and forgiveness are part of your lives. Only then will you find happiness. Only then will you make your best contribution to all your brothers and sisters in this great nation. You are part of Australia, and Australia is part of you. And the church itself in Australia will not be fully the church that Jesus wants her to be until you have made your contributions to her life, and until that contribution has been joyfully received by others. So that's coming from our great leader, the Pope. Okay. And I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you young people today, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you, Patsy. I think that we can appreciate all of the things that you've said to us today, and we look forward to some of the questions that the students have got for you. So I'll invite Richard up, okay, to talk about Torres Strait Islander spirituality. Thanks very much, everyone.
Aku batai, orang boy. Bawa buku bawa dalam layar. Kalau kapas ni teman kau, nanti teman kau guys, aku nak teman kau. Knowledge the traditional knowledge of the land. Also acknowledge the importance of the ceremony that we open today. Also acknowledge and respect the students here, and peace to you all. I got a call yesterday from the office to appear today. It appears that I've been put in line instead. So I'll do my best to excite you guys. Where I come from, like Sister said, yes, the bloodline goes to Erule, the eastern Torres Strait, Miriam. I'm from the southern part of Torres Strait, Kauri. Kauri, we have 54 islands in the Torres Strait, and we are the regional owners of that area. Our usually would have regional. That's truly identify us who we are, or regional. We We are the first, as of six, 8 months ago, we heard that a professor in Sydney, in Brisbane, mentioned that we are the oldest living people in this country. Correct. We came through the first in the landmass from New Guinea and Australia. And we're still here today. We've praised spirituality in a way that's been practiced before Christianity came to Torres Strait. Torres Strait, Christianity came in 18, I'm not sure, 72, coming of the light, and every year you see the celebration, the families have it in Canton throughout the country. But we don't celebrate Christianity because we practice Christianity before Christianity came to us. And we've got a lot of evidence up in one of the islands where one of the areas where our people carved a rock into a table. And on that table they carved a Bible. And inside of the table they carved a fountain of water for baptism. And that evidence is still today, is there. That there comes a time when we will show to the world that we practice Christianity before Christianity came to us. It's important for students as yourselves that when we talk about Jesus Christ, or like Sister mentioned before, we practice through our totems. Our totems are the oldest constitution in the world. Never need to be reviewed. It still exists today. You can see it, plants and animals. They were created first before man came to existence. It is very important, for example, me and my wife traveling down to Argy Bay for our first honeymoon. We're traveling through Tali, and I see this eagle traveling. Red eagle. And I said to her, I want to try beating him. And, give him a drag, So and I took off, and he took off. It went like this. He must have seen me speeding, so he must have. So he passed in front of me. And the wife said, slow down, slow down. And I slowed down. I said to her, you know what? What's that sign meaning? Because the plants and animals were created first. I said, we'll see police down the road. And when we came on the corner, we see the cops standing with the radar down. And she couldn't believe that. I said, that's how powerful spirituality. To respect the spirituality within yourself, respect will come upon you. I've got three important questions that I like to leave to the students. When I finish, grab my book. But I'll go back to Torres Strait. The Christianity came to Mariala, then to Darnley, but Darnley first, then to Mariala, and then to Western Torres Strait of Boeing Islands. And then swiggled down to our area, the coming of the lights in 1872, I think. But before the coming of the light, we had churches, school in Prince of Wales Island, Murabba. We practiced Christianity at that time because we had SPG, Society Propagation of the Gospel. We practiced that before LMS came, London Missionary came to the Torres Strait. So we were practicing Christianity at that time. And now, all the Torres Strait Islands, with our families in the mainland and everywhere, taken God as a refuge and Savior. But when we praise God, There's no mucking around that. You have to praise Him. And when you praise Him, when you go to church, you praise Him 100%. But when you walk out the door, are you still 100%? That spiritual sustainable democracy is very unique and powerful. And why Torres Strait have taken Bible so strong, Christianity. Any function that we do have, weddings, birthdays, tombstone opening, whatever, there's always chorusing. And Torres Islanders, they love to sing. If I had this information a week ago, I could have brought my brothers here to the same song for you guys, to excite you guys. And I will leave one comment that I wrote a few months ago to my brother, passed on. I know he's with the Almighty. And I'll grab my way. This is for the kids, students here. This is the statement that we were going to talk about, but he passed on. And I'll leave it with the kids to think about it, and try to find it in the scriptures. Because this is the one I was going to talk about, so we can share it in the scriptures. This is what I wrote to him. I said to him, we are not black because we are cursed. We are black because we are the first light out of darkness. Black is not a color. We are black because we are the essence from which all colors come from. I leave this three statement, and I'll email it to the for students. Look in the scriptures and see why they bring men. Because, you know, when I was reading, when I found out Abram is the founder of the Jews. Really. He originated from Ethiopia. So what do you think he looked like in 18 AD? Because that's the important question I talked about, is that the first light out of darkness. And thank you.